Live from San Francisco, I am your host. I'm Sid, co-founder and CEO at GitLab, and you're watching CEO 101. This is our call where new hires get to ask me easy and hard questions. In preparation of this call, there was a link in the invite about gitlab.com/culture/GitLab101. And we're going to spend the next 40 minutes, 50 minutes diving into questions or concerns you might have. I'd say fire away.
Okay, I've got a question. When you are contemplating the future direction of the product, who do you feel most accountable to? The board, the users, your own sense of what is right?
Yeah, thanks for that question. And I forgot to say, everyone, welcome to GitLab. Thanks for joining. But thanks for kicking us off, Sarah. At Y Combinator, they have a slogan, and that's make something users want, or make something people want. And I think that's a good guiding principle in the end, where we're accountable to the people that use or could use our product. And I think the hardest thing sometimes is to think not about the people using the product today, but using it in the future. And we had that where we expanded the scope of GitLab. The existing users will always want you to, like, they're happy with the product. They're like, well, don't change it too much. I like it the way it is now. Keep it the same. Just fix all the bugs and add a bit more depth to it, add a bit more features of the existing stuff. But you have to remember, like, at that point, the majority of the world wasn't using GitLab. So we also had to say, like, okay, well, how can we serve more people? And there's stuff needed for that as well. But I think that should be the guiding principle. And then, yeah, we have expectations of the board. They don't want us to wreck the company, run out of money. We'll have expectations if we become a public company. Those people invest in us, and they would want to see a return on their investment. But I think even then, it still starts with making something people want. And if they don't want it, they will not use it, or they will not pay you. So it's still the same metric. And how do you know if you made something people want? We're not measuring that right now, but I think we should. A customer satisfaction score, a CSAT score, or a net promoter score for the product. And also, they will vote with their feet, so you can see it on the retention rates and cohort analysis, whether it's resonating with them.
Hey, Sid, I'll jump in. I was just curious, what was the best feature we just shipped in 11.7, and what are you looking forward to most in 11.8?
Yeah, so I like that we ship NPM support. I think that's a big thing. And it now means that we're supporting both a registry, both for Java applications and now for JavaScript applications. And it also kind of paves a path to support a lot more. We probably have to end up supporting 30 different types of applications. But it also unlocks the next step, which is a dependency proxy. Right now, if you use open source, you're getting it straight from the source. And if someone messes with that, you're immediately vulnerable. And there's now been at least 2 vulnerabilities and on the NPM registry. So I think a lot of people are interested in more safety. And with a dependency proxy, we can offer more safety, more performance, lower cost. So I like that, and Dimitri will, the co-founder, will be working on that.
Hey, Sid. I read the history of GitLab here. I was curious. It looks like you came across it back in 2012. So curious how you came across GitLab specifically. How did you hear about it? And then how did you get introduced to Dimitri there? Yeah,
thanks for that. So I saw about it on Hacker News. a popular website, and I think it was on the homepage somewhere, like there was a new release or something like that. And the introduction was, I thought it was a great project, and I wanted to start GitLab.com, the software as a service for GitLab, which wasn't around at the time. And I sent Dimitri an email like, hey, I'm starting this. I know you're the author. I'm just going to use your software and try to build a business out of this. I hope you don't mind. And he sent an email back like, no, that's totally cool. It's open source. Go do it. And I hope you make it more popular, because that's my goal. So that was a really, like, I didn't know the guy. I only knew him that he was the author. My mental image of him was a mobster in a pink suit, because he had a Grand Theft Auto avatar everywhere. And that stayed the same for a very long time. It was a year later that I figured out that people didn't want to pay for the SaaS service that much, but there was a lot of on-premise. And Dimitri tweeted to the world, like, I want to work on GitLab full time. And even then, like, I think I was sending him a paycheck for like months, and then still I haven't seen him. So I asked him for a picture. He wouldn't want to do video calls. So I asked him for a picture. He sent me a picture with him with sunglasses on. Like, he wasn't super comfortable sharing how he looked, even though he looks fine. But that's how we got to know each other. So it was really, there was no connection. And I think a really remarkable thing is that here was some Westerner that hadn't contributed, a guy from the Netherlands that hadn't contributed anything to the project, trying to commercialize it. And he was okay with that. And I think that sharing of the pie is a lesson we shouldn't forget. As we get bigger, there will be other companies making money with GitLab, and we should cheer them on. We should say, that's awesome. What can we do for you to help you? And not say, oh, well, we kind of own this and we should get all the profit. That is not what open source is about.
Hey, Sid, can I tag along just as you were saying, cheering people? My question is, what keeps you awake at night? And how can we as GitLabbers help you ease that pain a bit?
Well, I'm not in pain, actually. I have a great job, and I lied awake about GitLab when .com was going down for our users. Like, when you start something like that, you kind of say, hey, you can depend on this, and it wasn't dependable. So that was bad. And before we had Kathy and the rest of the security team, I lay awake of us not responding appropriately to people disclosing vulnerabilities, or us just not doing our homework as people expected. Because both like downtime and like 0 days are just things that are super affecting our users. So, and they can get out of hand where you don't have enough response time. And I think right now, I think about our future, we see more and more public clouds offering DevOps tooling. I think that's an interesting development, and we should keep abreast of what's happening there. But I think we have time to adjust and respond and figure it out. So right now, I'm not lying awake at night, and there are things on my mind. I did a group conversation this morning, so you can look through the slides. There's a lot going on, and it's interesting, but I think we're doing good, and I'm very, very positive about the future ahead.
Hey, Sid.
There's a lot in, oh, go ahead.
Carol first, thanks.
Oh, hi. Yeah, I was just curious what you would consider your steepest learning curve over the last couple of years.
Thanks. A lot of things. I think one of the hardest things, and I'm still on the curve, is letting go of things. Delegating responsibility and handing that to other people, and not coming up with a solution, but asking the right questions. I'm still on a curve there. It's also, if I look at the company, I always see, I want the company to be really, really good. So I always see, like, it always mismatches with that, because we're really good, but we're not really, really good. Like, there's always something wrong. And I keep pointing out like, oh, we could do better there, we could do better there. And it's really important to also be like celebrate the things that are going well, and I could improve a lot there. And you can also Google GitLab CEO flaws. It has a more extensive list.
Sid, there's a lot of stuff in the handbook about culture and values, and I'd love to hear sort of what the values mean to you personally, and whether there are any that like are particularly relevant for you at this point.
Yeah, well, I guess all the values are important to me, and I think a lot of them are things that I think we set as a tone early, and then we doubled down on them. I'm from the Netherlands. We're known for being pretty cheap, so efficiency is a value that might have come with my upbringing. I think the transparency, we are still very afraid of creating too much of a distance between the people in the company and people in the wider community around GitLab. So that's how that came about. I think iteration is something that's very hard to do, very painful, but also very effective. So I'm constantly on the watch out to make sure that we're sticking to that value, because I see it can get lost as a company grows bigger and people are trying to fix processes, but they might inadvertently introduce things that make iteration harder. Inadvertently, I think I'm trying to say.
Hi, Sid. It's Melissa here. How are you doing?
Good. How are you, Melissa?
Good, good. I have a question about what are you most excited about industry trend-wise, and how does GitLab play into some of those industry trends you're excited about?
So industry trends in the DevOps.
Yeah, in the DevOps space.
Yeah. I like being right, which is not always super healthy, but I think it's nice to see that Microsoft is doubling down on Azure DevOps, which is kind of an integrated solution for the whole DevOps lifecycle. It has about like a third of the scope that GitLab has, but it's great to see that people are starting to build integrated solutions, same as Amazon CodeStar. So I think these are the smart. These companies are very smart. They have a lot of resources, and they're doubling down on an integrated approach. And I think it makes sense, because if you look at the categories on our homepage, like there's 8 times 10, there's probably 70 to 75 on there. Who has time to integrate like 75 tools? It's a big distraction. And so there's always an unbundling or a bundling of tools going on. And right now the trend is bundling, and we're at the forefront. And I think if you're out with a group and you take a turn and nobody's following you, you should doubt whether you're going in the right direction. I think we see people starting to follow us, and I'm very encouraged by that.
A curiosity question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, so I was going to ask, I don't know if it's appropriate to mention competitor names, so I'll try to avoid that. But I'm thinking about a competitor that their main strength is their issue tracker and their workflows around that. And is that a space that GitLab, which doesn't really seem to be competing that well in, is that an area that you see expansion in to try to overtake that market?
Yeah, for sure. We're going after Jira, and we're going after them in a big way, including all the custom workflows. Now, Victor Wu, the product manager, is breaking his head on how to do that in a way that is still very friendly to the end user. Because what we see in a lot of companies is that they adopted the custom workflows, but they almost they've customized the process to a point where it's affecting the productivity of the end user. That's not the fault of Jira. That's the people customizing it in a bad way. But is there a way to prevent that, and how can we make that better? And he's thinking about that, and we're doubling down. This year, we'll have 3 teams in plan and 3 teams in create, even though create is like the repos and what one of the most important ways people start with GitLab, but we're also doubling down on plan because we're very close to being an acceptable Jira alternative. And we've already seen companies switch. I think we've seen more like SMB companies switch than the large accounts. And I think this is the year when we're going to see large accounts switch as well. That being said, we'll still have great support for Jira if people want to use it. We're not going to force anyone to switch, but we are going after that custom workflows.
Okay, I'm going to pick up. I said, I saw a video of how you talked about one of the hardest things with, starting GitLab or asking for investment money was holding the line on the remote philosophy, which I'm first of all, just want to start by saying thank you so much, because I think everybody on this call is super excited to be a part. And that would have only been possible if you held that line. So thank you for that. I guess my question is, I think there's a lot of things that are new when you start, like new ways of doing things that we have to adopt. Specifically, I think about issues being created. And JJ walked me through that process yesterday, and I was amazed at how much can be done, and it was super exciting, but also I have to learn how to do it. I just wanted to know kind of when you took the stance that internally we would be using the product in order to get things done, first of all, and challenges with that. And then I guess my second question is, what do you think is the hardest thing that new people to GitLab have to get used to? What takes the longest time in order for them to integrate?
Thanks for the question. You're welcome on holding that line on remote. I admire your ceiling. It's really, really beautiful. It's a work of art.
It's attics.
Great. So the challenges we had to kind of in the onboarding issue was we had multiple sources of truth. We had a page in the handbook that told you what to do, and we had an issue that told you what to do. And I was like, okay, we need it. It's all in the issue, and the issue can have links, like next to a checkbox, there can be a link, but we can't have go to this page and there's 5 items on it, go to that page. There were multiple issues. There was like you had a general onboarding issue, and then you had a specific onboarding issue for your departments. You had 2 issues, and I made the call like, okay, it should all be in one issue. And I know it's going to be 140 lines, but at least you have an overview. So that was one of the calls we made. I think what's hard about onboarding is that it's a bit lonely. Like there's so much you can do by not asking people and just reading that maybe people get the impression that they can't ask other people. So we introduced buddies for that, but there's maybe more we can do. People report it feels a bit lonely, and I'm open to and people ops too, to suggestions how to mitigate that. People report that the first month is the hardest. Other than that, I think the hardest thing to get used to is our iteration value. Many people like the onboard and like, okay, well, I'm going to work on my 100-day plan and things like that. And it's like, no, like figure out some things you can do, figure out the minimal thing you can do that, and then move on from that. And I think that's very different, and it's very hard for people to get used to that.
Hey Sid, I have a question. Are there things that other remote companies or organizations are doing that they're doing better than GitLab, or things that we're not doing yet that you think we can aspire to or possibly do better?
Well, that's a great question. I'm sure there are. I'm just not talking with them enough. I think other companies that are doing great is Zapier has a great remote culture. There's companies we can learn from. I also think we're not promoting it enough. I spend a lot of time on promoting it, but I think we don't have the content and the rest in place to promote it enough. I think there should be a conference about all remote, and we should be organizing it. I think there should be way more blog articles. People are craving this information, like how can I make remote work in my company, and we could be a huge supplier of that. So I think we can do a lot better there. And there's also kind of media tactics you could do. Like, for example, I think Zapier had a great thing like, we'll pay for you to migrate away from San Francisco because it's too busy already. And even though that maybe not get used a lot, like it gets you a headline and it gets people to pay attention.
Thanks.
Say that the question, kind of piggybacking off that, in terms of, well, first of all, I think the set of values in the handbook, I think that's a big reason why I joined. I think I resonate with a lot of the values in there. But how do you foresee, as the team scales, how do those values get upheld, maintained as the orgs, like even on this call, there are like so many people, and how do you envision that culture being perpetuated and, upheld, maintained?
Yeah, there's a section on that page and it's incomplete. So let me change it right now. Your values are who you hire, who you give bonuses to, who you promote, and who you let go. In the end, that's what people will look at. And then that's already on the page, but I think we forgot one. It's who we praise. So how do we reinforce our values? Onboarding, promotions, but praise is not in there. So I'm going to add that one. I think I'm going to who you thank. Although praise is a more appropriate word, we have a thank you channel. So it feels like it should be between promotions is bigger. Oh, which behavior we compliment? It's already there. The order seems a bit off though. So you have onboarding, and then you get a compliment, and then you get a bonus, and you get a promotion, and then some people are like, oh, this who we compliment, what behavior we compliment. Great. So great thing, it was already there. Now a thing we can do, we have a thank you channel where we give compliments to people in a public way, but other than we don't link that to our values. Many of the other things we do at the company, we link them explicitly to our values. If someone gets a bonus or a promotion, you'll always see a Google Doc, and the main structure of that doc are our values. In the thank you channel, that's not the case. So Kirsten Abma had a great idea. She said, look, why don't we make emojis for each one of our values? And so when we thank someone, we can add the appropriate emojis so that we remind ourselves of our values there. So I thought that was a great suggestion, and I hope she does that or someone else does it.
Hi, Sid. I'm Betsy. I have a question for you that kind of tags on to a few of the last questions. So I'm wondering if, when you think of all of the reasons that someone would come and work for GitLab, what would be like the main thing that you would tell a candidate who's considering joining the company? Like, what would that one almost selling point be that you would want to highlight to them, and why?
Yeah, Betsy, I look forward to working with you on spreading the word about GitLab. Betsy's going to do employer branding. Look, if I had to pick one thing, it would be our number one value, and that is results. I think in GitLab, you can have an outsized impact. You can have a sense of progress, but that comes without having us focusing on your input. So we're going to make every hour you work count, but we're not going to try to maximize the hours you work, and we're going to try to give you flexibility on when you work. I think that would be my pitch.
Great, thank you.
Hey, Sid, Jeff Reed here. I have a question for you. How would you explain to my father, who is not technical, what we do?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's some, thanks for turning on your video. There's some talk in the CEO channel about an analogy to GitLab. And we were working on a chef's kitchen. So you're the chef, you want to make software. GitLab is the kitchen in which you prepare it. I think the one that's going to stick is the iPhone one. You had that time before the iPhone where you had lots of separate tools. And then with the iPhone, it became an integrated product. And that was way better than having a separate phone and a separate music player and a separate photo camera. I think that's how we should position GitLab.
Thanks.
Is it okay to ask a second question?
Yes, you can ask as many questions as you like.
Okay. This may be a refuse to answer one, but it's about the name. I mean, probably a third of the people who, when I've said, friends of mine, even in the software industry, when I've said going to work for GitLab, they're like, oh yeah, it's Microsoft, right? You know, that confusion with that other company's name is so evident and so obvious, and it kind of makes us look like a wannabe, like we're sort of like the wannabe of this more well-known thing. Is there ever a discussion? Also, it seems limiting because we're about so much more than Git that like it sounds like we're just SCM. Is there ever been a talk about changing the name or like trying to work that into the branding somehow? Because it certainly makes it hard.
Yep. We wouldn't pick the same name if we pick it today. Dimitri picked it even way before I even know it was a thing. And I think it was appropriate at the time. But it's no longer, the literal interpretation is no longer covering it. I don't think that should hold us back. There's a company that has you stay on an airbed. It's called Airbnb. I don't think anybody in this call, I think half of the people probably used Airbnb. I think 0 people probably ever slept on an airbed in them. So you can escape your name. The reason not to change it is that it will be a huge hassle to our users because it's not just the name on our website and our business cards. It's also encoded in like where they host their repos. It is the directories in which it's installed on their computers. So other marketing wise, it's doable. It's not ideal, but it's doable. But because there's also so much infrastructure that's linked to that name, I think it will be a huge hassle for everyone. And we're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to make sure that people know us for what we are, a single application for the entire software lifecycle. And that's happening. Last year at AWS reInvent, we had some people come to our booth who were a bit confused about who we were. This year, Rep was really happy. He did a long shift at the booth. He said, I had 0 people being confused about who we were. Actually, I had one person that first went to the GitHub booth and figured that was GitLab, but they now came here. So it's starting to change. And I think the way not to be a wannabe is just to make sure we have a better product and more users and more revenue. And then that will fade away as a concern. So it's already starting to fade away as a concern. And I think a lot of people in the industry now know that there's both GitHub and GitLab, and they're quite different. Does everyone know? No. But that's why we're here. We got to educate the entire market.
Hey, Sid, I've got a question.
From
Josh first.
Sorry. Okay, thanks. Hey, so with the amount of hiring that's anticipated and the fact that you guys have you've grown so much over the last couple of years and you're getting some tenured employees, how will you decide when to promote from within versus hire from externally? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's very simple. Now, first of all, everyone should have a manager that can help them grow in their role. So you're entitled to a manager that helps you become better. The second thing is we should hire the best person for any role. So most of the time we will open up a vacancy and we allow the people internally to interview for that role, and we'll pick whoever is the best person for the role.
Hey, Sid, so I just wanted to follow up on my question earlier. Do you have a favorite feature of all time that we've shipped in GitLab?
Thanks for the question. I think there's a few that are memorable. I think that replacing Git-Lite as a foundation and standing on our own legs was a really pivotal one. I think introducing subgroups was really big change and really helpful. But I think the biggest one by far is combining GitLab and GitLab CI. It was not intuitive. It was something Camille proposed and Dimitri was against it. He convinced Dimitri and it came to me and I said, it's a ridiculous idea. We should have many sharp tools that we combine the Unix philosophy. But I was wrong. It turns out that GitLab is an operating system and GitLab is composed of many small things that you combine to build something great. And not only was it a big success, we had way less work, but most of all, people loved having a single application, a single pane of glass, a single login, a single concept of a user. But also it set the stage for everything that followed from there. We're not just combining create and verify, but we're combining 10 different stages. So that was the most pivotal thing. It was something I was actively against. And Camille only convinced me in the end because he said, we'll save some time. We only have to ship one product instead of two. And I never anticipated it would be such a great thing for our users.
May I make a follow-up to this question? We actually add a lot of new features, like, I don't know, NPM registry and all that stuff every month. And how do you think, I know one day there will be a point when we have some old features and our product become very, very complicated and hard to use. I don't know, how do you feel about, I don't know, what will we do with all that stuff? How will we probably one day remove something from the product or, I don't know, change it for something new?
Yeah, for sure. Totally agree. Yes, we will remove features from the product. For example, we used to have a wall in GitLab, kind of like a chat channel to share with other people in the project, and we removed that. And there will be future things we remove most of the time when they're not heavily used and they complicate adding new things to GitLab. And it's really important that the new features we add are orthogonal to the rest, that you can add them without like half overlapping with some things that we can separate them and keep our speed of iteration. That's hard, but I think so far we've been very successful in doing that. But we shouldn't hesitate to remove features. I think at GitLab, we don't cancel things. Like if we say we're going to make a next iteration, we ship it. But then we should also not be afraid if we made a minimum viable change, we shipped it and no one's liking it, no one's contributing, no one's asking for it, great, then we should remove that. It didn't happen too often because we have it easy. We're not inventing new things here. We're just looking at the market, what people already have, and then making sure that we add it as part of a single application. But for sure, we'll sometimes ship something that isn't used, and we shouldn't hesitate to remove it.
Hey, Sid, that leads me to think about quality. From a quality concept, what do you think is the most important quality characteristic we should be focused on from a future standpoint? Talking about capability, reliability, usability, security, things like that. So from a future aspect, as well as what the current customer focus is right now.
Yeah, so which non-functional attributes do I want to see? And I'm going to say all of them because that's the obvious answer. Obviously, it should be secure and everything else. I did touch on a few things I think we should prioritize a bit more than we are currently doing in my group conversation this morning. And one of them was performance and mostly resource usage, and to be specific, memory usage. We haven't focused on that, and it's gone out of hand. We went from 2 gigabytes 2 years ago to 8 gigabytes now. So that's something we should invest in. And you're a senior test automation engineer. We know kind of how much memory GitLab uses when you boot it up, but it's a manual process to establish that. And also, it would be very nice to have kind of you boot it up and fire a bunch of requests at it to also see things like memory that doesn't get released and things like that. I think having a window in that and making sure that we see regressions would be super helpful. So if we add something that really makes the situation worse, we're able to see that. Like just the A testing, just not 2 variants, just making sure we're not regressing when we introduce something new, and not just for when you boot it up, but after it got 1,000 requests. I think that'd be amazingly helpful.
With our growing feature set, number of engineers, code base, how do you see the maintainer system on our projects scaling?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I think we have maintainers now for a bunch of projects. I think for the smaller projects that's scaling, I think we're gonna for the main repository, I think we're gonna get more and more granular, where there's kind of code owners for a lot of the application, and we probably went from maintainers at the top level, like this is the GitLab EE maintainer, to now at the stage level, and probably we're going to go to the capability level, or maybe some other division more based on like the directory structure and code than on user-facing things. But yeah, I think the solution is more code owner files that define who's responsible, or who you should go to with questions and to get a merge approval.
Might we see a horizontal infrastructure team to utilize more shared code, shared utilities?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think so, but I'm very far away from the day-to-day coding now. But I think in general, I like it when people have to make something, they have as much ownership as possible. Like if you want to do fast iterations, you can't be stuck in a queue behind others asking for infrastructure to deliver this interface. So like, I'd be like, if you can use it, if you need it, you can build it. And then of course, the anti-pattern would be if we're not reusing other people's work. So I think that's where like our staff engineers have a responsibility to pay attention. Like, hey, you're introducing new charting library, but we settled on eCharts. Like, have you thought about using that? And that goes for a lot more than just charting libraries. That goes for every module we have. And also maybe sometimes defining a pattern, like when do we use a module, when do we use a service worker, etc.
Hey Sid, I'm looking for a book recommendation. I've read Hard Thing About Hard Things, and I've read Crucial Conversations, and both that I've heard you recommend both of those, and they're really good. Any other recommendations that you might have?
Yeah, my number one suggestion would be High Output Management by Andrew Grove.
Okay.
And
Got it. Thank you.
I hope you like it. It's a very kind of action-packed book about everything that you want to know if you're in management. I've never read a book with so many practical tips.
Awesome. Thanks.
Looping back to the performance discussion, do you think that there's a value in doing that profiling within GitLab and exposing metrics on where the compute cost and overhead and of various types is going within the GitLab application, so that customers who are paying for hosted storage in the cloud can see where their costs are arising from within GitLab?
Yes, I haven't even considered that, but that's a really great suggestion. I am seeing multiple customers say, hey, we want to do shared CI runners, but we're really afraid of where we can attribute the cost. So having an overview of like your shared CI minutes went to these groups will be amazingly helpful. We have something in our capability in our capabilities on our homepage, which is like cluster costs. So if you run GitLab, probably most of the costs will not be in GitLab itself, running GitLab and a CI test, but in the deployed applications. So that's actually on our roadmap. The costs of GitLab itself, I think for us, of course, we have pretty severe cost. I think for most people, the most of the cost is probably in, and also for us, the CI minutes and the storage of all the artifacts and image registry images that get created. And it would be great if we can attribute that to different groups. It would help a lot of our customers. Great suggestion.
Hey, Sid, in thinking about working with our customers, can you think of anything that would be a really important takeaway and things that we should ensure that we bring to these calls?
Yeah, there's a lot of things. I think that it's really exciting that we have open issue trackers. So I wouldn't hesitate to, like, after you had a meeting, kind of show them link them to your comments that you made. Like, you made a comment like, hey, this customer is really interested in this feature, or they want to use it quite differently, etc. If I was a customer and I received like 5 links where I saw you followed up in all this, you found these issues, you followed up in them, and you did a good job describing what I asked for, I'd feel much more special than when that was hidden from me.
Hey, Sid, I have another question. Regarding competing with GitHub on the mindshare, the open source community, what kind of initiatives are you most excited about improving the social aspect of GitLab.com?
Yeah, right now, it's not a big focus of us. We have relatively few open source projects on GitLab.com. We do have a bunch of open source projects that started self-hosting. And that's really exciting. So I look forward to those teams as they start using GitLab more and more. And I'm thinking talking about like Drupal and a couple of other big projects that they're going to come back with stuff they're going to contribute. They're also going to come back with some stuff they can't fix by themselves and they need our help. So I look forward to supporting those projects and then making GitLab better for open source in that way. So I don't want us to come up with it. I want the people actually using it to come up with it. That being said, have a look at the GitHub Explore page and the GitLab Explore page. Theirs looks much better. So maybe would be great to have an incremental improvement there.
Thank you.
Hey, Sid. My name is Eric. I'm a solutions architect. So one of GitLab's struggles has been distinguishing ourselves from GitHub. I mean, even before I started the interview process, I used to explain to people that GitLab is kind of that self-hosted GitHub with CI put on top. So what more would you like to see our team do to spread the name in the open source community, at Linux Fest, at local user groups, or Linux user groups, or even in the education system?
Yeah, I think especially in the education system, there's a lot we can do. We do have a university program. Universities can get a free Ultimate license. Right now, we're just collecting all of that and not doing anything with it. There's also a project by GitHub called Classroom, which is really nice. It's for teachers to kind of farm out assignments to students and collect the answers back. I noticed that was open source. So it'd be interesting to add GitLab support to it and make sure that people can use the same functionality if they're using GitLab. So I think that's an interesting thing to have a look at.
Great, thanks.
Okay, so just looping back to the values that we spoke about before, see in the handbook that they've been condensed and there was more and some sub-bullets put in, or I'm just curious if you can see any more iterations of the values coming down the line.
Yeah, I do hope we keep iterating on the values. It's been a while since we condensed them to kind of 6 values. It seems to be working. And from time to time, we kind of add a sub-value, clarify a sub-value. But I look forward to, maybe we need a 7th value. Maybe we need to take away a few sub-bullets that are no longer relevant. Like I think there's, like everything in GitLab, it's a living, it's always in draft. So I hope people perceive them as being subject to change. With that said, we're at our time limit. Again, welcome to GitLab. If you have any concerns, it's everything in the end, I'm responsible, so feel free to come to me with any problems you encounter. And I hope you have a great time working at GitLab. And thanks so much for all the questions. Have a great day.
Thank you, Sid.